If we were to lose the midterms, heaven forbid, these Democrats, y'all, impeachment's not even the big concern. They will turn every committee of Congress into an investigative body, and they'll go after the president's family, the cabinet, his donors and friends. Half of you in this room will be targeted.
So Mike Johnson decided to try his hand at comedy at this freedom and faith conference of, a whole bunch of far-right Christian nationalists to basically, assuage their fears that, don't worry, the Republicans are in great shape going into the midterms. We're doing really well. And look at the other side. These Democrats, they're in total disarray. And just look at the insane candidates that they're putting up. Obviously, this is in response to the fact that 3 Zoran Mamdani-backed DSA candidates all won their race for Congress. And so he decides that I'm going to fear-monger to a group of far-right Christian nationalists about how awful these DSA members are by reading the policy platform of the DSA. And as we go through, I want you to try and find something objectionable about this list of policies. Here's Mike Johnson.
The DSA, the Democrat Socialists of America, it sounds so innocuous, doesn't it? No, it doesn't. Don't say that. This is their platform. Listen, this is actually quotes from their platform that they published, I think, about a day or two ago. You can find this on the internet. Okay, here's just a sample of what they're about. They put this on paper. They're saying the quiet things out loud. Abolish the Electoral College, replace the two-party system with a multi-party democracy. Expand the House of Representatives, implement proportional representation and ranked choice voting in all elections. Establish public ownership of the largest corporations and essential industries to ensure democratic control and accountability to the people. Abolish ICE and grant amnesty for all. End sanctions on Cuba, Venezuela, and Iran. Free Palestine. End all military and economic aid to Israel. Prosecute U.S. and Israeli leaders responsible for the genocide in Gaza. Abolish the carceral state. Y'all, it goes on and on and on. Defund the Department of War. Replace the president and the Supreme Court with an executive and judiciary chosen and subordinate to Congress, which they're hoping to take over. And the last one is abolish the Senate. Now, some of you may agree with that, but don't, just leave that one there. Okay. It's fine. I'm kidding. I love my colleagues over there.
Okay, so first off, abolish the Electoral College and replace the two-party system. The Electoral College has got to go. It's massively undemocratic and it's antiquated. But the Republicans are like, ridiculous. Why would you want to get rid of the system that has overturned the popular vote and the will of the people and given the Republicans the presidency twice in the last 25 years? And as a result of that, they've gotten a MAGA majority on the Supreme Court, right? So George W. Bush lost the popular vote in 2000, got to seat, I think, 3 Supreme Court justices who are all still on the bench today. And then the same thing in 2016. Donald Trump lost the popular vote, got to seat 3 Supreme Court justices. Why would you want to get rid of the system where, we actually lost the popular vote, but we still won the presidency? Ridiculous. And then as far as, replacing the two-party system, there's this misunderstanding that, half the country are Democrats and half the country are Republicans. No, most people are not either. And the biggest problem we have in this country is that most people don't vote because neither party really represents the majority of people. And despite what the Republicans tell you, the Democratic Party is not a far-left party, okay? They're a center-right party at best, but if you put the Democrats in somewhere like Europe, for example, they'd be considered a far-right party because the establishment Democrats don't support things like universal health care, which, again, most countries in Europe have. So the idea of getting rid of a two-party system, why would that be a bad thing? If you have 2 choices and one you don't like and one you really don't like, then you're always picking the lesser of 2 evils. Second point, expand the House of Representatives, implement proportional representation, and ranked choice voting. We need better representation. There's a reason that Congress consistently sits at a sub 30% approval rating. And as far as ranked choice voting goes, that again kind of ties into the fact that it's if you have two candidates and you don't like either, you're always picking the lesser of two evil. But if you're like, hey, I really like this candidate, my second choice would be this person, my third choice would be this person, then you don't have this whole thing with like, oh, you can't pick this person because it might hand the Republicans the election or whatever. It's like, if you're always picking between two and you don't like either, then you're really, it's the illusion of choice, what like George Carlin was talking about. Like they give you the illusion of choice. No, these candidates are selected for people. And if you only have two options and the two options are basically owned by the same donors, then you never actually get the will of the people. You get the will of the corporations. Okay. Next, establish public ownership of the largest corporations and have more democratic control. Ridiculous. Why would you want the people to have any kind of say as to whether or not, this AI company gets to build a data center right next to your house? And it's like they make all the money, they get to, do whatever they want, and we deal with all the consequences. So you get a data center, you get to deal with the noise pollution, you get to deal with the light pollution, you get to deal with the extremely high electricity costs, you get to deal with them sucking up all of the fresh water to cool these things down. Why would you want people to have any kind of say in where those things go in? Insane. And this works with literally everything. It's like, the oil companies get to drill on, national land, for example. The people of the United States don't get any of that profit. The shareholders do, but the people don't. Next, abolish ICE. This one is so obvious. I mean, like, this is a much more popular position now, especially in Trump's second term, because ICE is just objectively a rogue paramilitary for Trump that doesn't obey the law at all. They all wear masks. They don't wear badges. They're rounding up innocent people. I think it's like over 90% of the people that they've scooped up and thrown into concentration camps or deported have zero criminal background whatsoever. They have deported people without due process against court orders. They're locking people up with no ability to talk to family or attorneys. And, and now we have American citizens that have been killed by ICE. Okay, not just the ones that have been killed, but like you also have like all these massive, abuses of power where they're shooting people with like pepper spray and pepper balls and flashbangs and tear gas. Why would you want to get rid of these people? Ridiculous. Next, end sanctions of Cuba, Venezuela, and Iran. So like Cuba especially, this one of the better things that Barack Obama did was kind of normalize relationships with Cuba. We're still fighting like we're in the Cold War and communism is coming to take over the United States. Cuba is a small island off the coast of Florida, and they're no threat to the United States. But because we're imperialist, crazy warmongers, and Trump wants to like expand out and like take over countries like Venezuela and like Cuba, like we're literally doing an oil blockade and starving the country. They're having power outages where, the hospitals, people who are on ventilators, things like that, they have to do like emergency interventions to like crank on the generators to keep these people alive because we're starving the country. And there are people there that are like going through the trash to try and find food and things like that. There are people that are going through the trash to like find a straw so that they can reuse it. It's disgusting what we're doing. Why are we doing that? And again, like I said, try and find something objectionable about this policy platform. Next, free Palestine, end all military aid to Israel. Ridiculous. Why would we stop giving billions and billions and billions of dollars to a country that's committed to genocide in Gaza? They're taking over the West Bank, which is Palestinian land. They're bombing southern Lebanon and stealing territory from Lebanon. They've stolen Syrian territory. They're bombing Iran. They're literally starting like a 7 or 8 front war. They're bombing every single neighboring country. Why would we want to stop giving them money and weapons? And oh, by the way, while your tax dollars are going to Israel and they get things like universal health care and free public college, we don't get it here. Ridiculous. Why would anybody support getting rid of that aid to Israel? It's like, again, the only people that are like, this is an insane position are people that have like brain worms. And I don't even think that it's that it's that like partisan of an issue anymore. I mean, like there are more Republicans that support Israel than Democrats, but like even Republicans are pissed about this. Okay, next. Prosecute U.S. and Israeli leaders for the genocide in Gaza. Imagine being against this. And this is not my opinion. This is not the opinion of leftists. This is the opinion of international scholars, like genocide scholars and the International Criminal Court, that it's a genocide in Gaza. Netanyahu is a war criminal. Ben Gvir and Smotrich are war criminals. And by extension, Donald Trump is a war criminal, because he's the one who gives them all the money and weapons. And he's a war criminal outside of Gaza because Trump has started bombing, obviously Venezuela, stealing Nicolas Maduro, bombing fishing boats off the coast of Venezuela and in the Pacific. They bombed Syria, Iran, Somalia, Ethiopia. I can't even keep count of how many countries. But imagine being against the idea of prosecuting war criminals. Okay. Next, abolish the carceral state and redirect funds to public services. Guys, we have 5% of the world's population, and we house 20% of the world's prisoners. The prison system in this country, I could do like an hour-long video on the private for-profit prison system, but suffice it to say, it's a ridiculously broken system, and if we put more money into like rehabilitation and making sure that people who do commit crimes don't do them again, and we invest into people, because like the number one predictor of somebody committing a crime is usually poverty. But we're too busy sending all of our money overseas so that we can bomb brown people 6,000 miles away. Next, defund the Department of War. Ridiculous. Why would you want to stop giving trillions of dollars to the Pentagon when they can't account for 2/3 of their money and they've failed 8 audits in a row? Like, and again, all this money does not benefit the American people, despite what they try and sell you. Look, Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. Ask a normal American, hey, do you think that Iran was on the verge of like nuking the United States? Nobody thinks that. But that is why they want to continue to do this. And also because, the Republicans and Democrats are owned by the military-industrial complex. But again, we're talking about like next year, Trump wants to give them a $1.5 trillion budget. $1.5 trillion going to the military. If you cut the Department of War, if you cut the Pentagon budget in half, we would still have the largest military in the world. So we have to cut their budget and start actually putting that money towards things that help people here in the U.S., because none of the money actually goes to helping people. And oh, by the way, all of the money that we've wasted in Iran, which they can come up with that money in a second. What do we have to show for it? What do we have to show for it? If it's something for normal people, if it's healthcare, if it's education, if it's, improving and rebuilding infrastructure, how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it? If it's money for war, then come up with that money, no problem. So defund the Department of War, absolutely yes. I can't figure out how that's objectionable, because most people know, even if they're pro-military, that they're not getting anything by giving trillions of dollars to the Pentagon. Next, abolish the Senate and make the president subordinate to the House of Representatives. I actually kind of like this one. The Senate is one of the most undemocratic things that we have in this country, in the U.S. Congress, because it again, just like the Electoral College, it massively benefits the minority party, which are the Republicans. So, for example, in California, you have 2 senators. In every state, you have 2 senators. In Wyoming, you have 2 senators. Population of Wyoming is a little over 500,000 people. Population of California is over 40 million people. So literally, the same 2 senators represent 80 times as many people as the 2 senators in Wyoming. But they get the same number of senators, and I can't remember what the exact number is, but like the Republican senators represent I think it's 19 million less people in this country, but they hold the majority. Again, tell me what's objectionable about this. If we're an actual democracy, right? A lot of this stuff is just basics, you know? If we believe in rule of law, a lot of this stuff is just basics. You have to abolish ICE. They don't follow the law. They break the law on a daily basis. You have to go after war criminals. They break the law on a daily basis. If you want an actual democracy, you have to have more than two parties that both take money from the same donors. Like, anyway, he goes on. He goes on to talk about how they have a great record to run on, right? And this part I found particularly funny because it's like, well, we have a great record to run on, and we have so many better candidates, and we're the pro-life party, and we're the pro-family party.
We have a great record to run on. You just heard our extraordinary Treasury Secretary recount some of the big wins that we've done. I could do this with you all day, talking about the 700 bills we passed through the House, the 100 executive orders we've codified, and all the great things we've done for hardworking American families, and pro-family policies, and pro-life policies, and we're fulfilling our promises. We have better candidates than the Democrats do. They are on the verge of an open civil war because the establishment Democrats are being pushed out by the Marxists. They're having a lot of disarray on their side, and that will play to our advantage in the midterms.
Does not mention any of the policies. Mike Johnson read the policy platform of the DSA, doesn't mention any Republican policies because they don't have any really good policies to run on. And I'm not looking at their platform, but I can tell you what the Republicans have done, which is they cut pediatric cancer research. That's really pro-family, right? They cut Medicaid and kicked 18 million people off of their health care. Super pro-family. They haven't raised wages. They're against having paid sick leave and paid family leave and paid time off. What about that is pro-family? So it's funny because he just asserts that, like, oh, the DSA is crazy and look at all of our great accomplishments, but doesn't mention any of them. So I think it's funny that he also mentions that the Democrats are fighting and that they're in total disarray. But, and that might not be totally untrue. Like, there are a bunch of establishment Democrats that are shitting their pants over the fact that not just the DSA members in New York, but candidates like Graham Plattner in Maine looks like he is going to blow out Susan Collins. And Abdul El-Sayed looks like he's going to do very well in Michigan. And these guys represent a lot of the same, policies as the DSA. But the Democrats would rather lose to Republicans than win with actual progressives, win with actual leftists. Because if the leftists actually won and took control of the party, that means that these people would become irrelevant. And the only thing that really keeps their power right now is the fact that they control everything and they get to control all the messaging and they get all the money. But if you get candidates through that don't take large, corporate PAC money and money from billionaires and stuff like that, then they're beholden to the people, not the corporations, and it would actually challenge the system. It would actually challenge power. And that's why the Democrats are fighting. But what's funnier is there's literally a story about how, like, Trump and, what's his name? Cassidy, were, like, yelling at each other because Trump couldn't get the Save America Act passed. And one, he doesn't have the votes in the Senate, but two, he's done so much to piss off the Republican parties, and Mike Johnson is like pretending like, well, they're in total disarray. The Republicans are in total disarray. Look who they have to defend, right? He's talking about how, like, Trump's going to be on the ballot. Yeah, and that is a nightmare for Republicans because Trump's approval rating, I just saw a poll not too long ago, 30%. This is catastrophically bad, like historically low. This is the lowest approval rating Trump's ever had outside of right after January 6th. And so him just going like, we're in great position. They have crazy candidates. Look at all of our accomplishments. Mentions nothing. And so, like I said, it's funny because if I were running for office, and I think every Democrat needs to recognize this, is that, like, they're going to call you a socialist and a communist and a Marxist and a fascist with zero regard for actual definitions. But they're going to call you that regardless of what you actually support. And what Bernie has shown, and later now, like people like Zoran Mamdani have shown, is yeah, I'm just going to wear the label. But if I wear the label, I get to define it. And Mike Johnson just reading all of this stuff off is like, if you actually asked a Democratic Socialist, you know, hey, what do you stand for? And they say, I want universal health care, and I want paid family leave, and I want to raise the minimum wage, and I want to give people paid time off, and I want to do free school breakfast and free school lunch, and I want to raise taxes on the ultra wealthy and the billionaires, and I want to redirect that money back into programs that actually help most people. Any normal person that you talk about, any normal voter is going to be like, yeah, I don't see a problem with that. Why would you? Because the country, everybody senses that the country is massively broken. And the reason that the Democrats fail is because they are bad at messaging, and the Republicans are very, very good at messaging, even though their message is trash. They're always on message, right? And their story is your life sucks because of trans people and immigrants and gay people and far left Democrats or whatever, right? And if the Democrats message and be like, hey, look, your life sucks, but it's actually not any of those things. It's because of the ultra wealthy, the billionaires, the Epstein class have stolen everything from you. And all of our laws and all of our policies cater to those people. And if you actually put that on to people and say, like, here's what's happened, here's why, here's my, policy prescription to fix it. Nobody, like I said, this platform is not objectionable. One of the big things that he leaves out is money in politics, but that would be literally the number one thing, is the fact that the ultra wealthy are able to buy policy and buy politicians. That's the biggest problem in our country besides the Supreme Court. Anyway, like I said, I found this super entertaining. If I were a Democrat, I would literally just cut this ad and be like, yeah, we stand for all of those things. Come at me, bro. Anyway, if you made it this far, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're not already subbed, click the bell as well. That way, hopefully YouTube will notify you the next time I upload a video, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.